I couldn't believe what was happening. After 12 years of marriage, after every compromise, every sacrifice, every silent moment I endured to keep peace, they were throwing me out. My husband's mother stood with her arms crossed, her lips tight, eyes scanning me like I was some kind of intruder in her perfect little world. "You'll have to leave," she said, her voice sharp, final. I tried to protest, tried to remind them of everything I'd done, but my words fell flat against their smug indifference. My husband didn't even look at me, just shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. They didn't know who they were messing with. Humiliation washed over me, hot and suffocating as I gathered my things, every piece of my life being stripped away, and stepped out into the cold, their laughter echoing behind me. I walked the empty streets, my hands clutching the small suitcase that now felt like the sum of everything I had left. Years of bending, compromising, and giving had taught me how to disappear in plain sight, how to make their lives easier while my own needs were ignored. I remembered birthdays they forgot, dinners where my presence seemed invisible, and conversations where my opinions were dismissed as if I didn't exist. Every sacrifice I made, every silent effort to keep the family together, had been met with indifference or quiet scorn. And yet, beneath the ache of betrayal, a spark lingered, something I hadn't realized until now. Those shares, quietly accumulating over the years, were mine, unseen, untouched, and waiting. Suddenly, loneliness shifted into something else, the faint hum of possibility, a reminder that while they had tried to erase me, I still had the power to rewrite the story on my own terms. I remembered the dinner tables, lavish on the surface but loaded with invisible lines I was never allowed to cross. My husband's siblings laughed easily, their achievements praised endlessly, while my own efforts, raising their children, managing the house, keeping peace, were barely acknowledged. I'd bring up a project at work or a new idea, and it would be brushed aside, replaced with a comment about someone else's success. Even small gestures I made, like cooking their favorite meals or organizing family events, were met with a polite nod or ignored entirely. And every time I tried to speak up, I felt the subtle tension, the unspoken reminder. I was not their equal. Yet inside, I knew the truth. I worked harder, gave more, and loved deeper than any of them. The contrast stung like salt in a wound, rejected and overlooked while they were celebrated for mediocrity, deserving so much less than what I had poured into their world. I never expected the call to change everything. My lawyer's voice on the other end was calm, almost clinical, but what he said made my world tilt. You, you own $47 million worth of shares, he said. At first I laughed nervously, thinking it was some mistake, a prank. 47 million? My mind raced, images of my life's humiliations flashing in rapid succession. The years of being ignored, of having my worth minimized, suddenly collided with the reality that I was untouchable. I could feel the pulse of power thrum through me, a heady mix of disbelief and exhilaration. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their pity. I had leverage. I could rewrite every interaction, every slight, every humiliation they'd ever thrown at me. And just like that, the powerless girl they thought they controlled became a force they could never have anticipated. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the weight of $47 million pressing on me like a secret weapon. My mind raced with possibilities, each more intoxicating than the last. They laughed at me before, dismissed me, made me feel invisible. But now, they would see me differently. Every gala, every dinner, every casual encounter could become a stage where I subtly reminded them who I had become. I imagined the looks on their faces when they realized the girl they mocked was now untouchable, commanding influence and wealth they couldn't ignore. I made mental lists, strategies for each family member, each social circle, how to assert my presence without seeming vengeful, how to turn their envy into acknowledgement. The tension in my chest was thrilling, a sharp contrast to the helplessness I had felt for years. For the first time, I felt in control, and the anticipation of their stunned reactions made me almost giddy. I started small, testing the waters of this new life I'd been handed. A designer bag that had once seemed frivolous, a sleek car parked conspicuously outside my apartment. Tiny signals that hinted at change, without shouting it. I attended a charity gala, where I had previously felt invisible, weaving through conversations with an ease I'd never known. Eyes lingered on me differently now, whispers following where once there had been silence. I watched old acquaintances shift in discomfort, noticing my presence, realizing they could no longer dismiss me. Each calculated move, a carefully chosen accessory, a confident smile, an offhand mention of my work, built momentum, a quiet power they couldn't yet quantify. I reveled in it, a thrill contrasting sharply with the years of being overlooked, underappreciated, and underestimated. With every subtle display, I felt my world tilt. The girl who had been shoved aside was now envied, desired, and undeniably present. And the anticipation of what I could do next was almost intoxicating. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A charity auction they were all attending, dressed in their familiar airs of superiority. I arrived quietly, letting the murmurs ripple through the room as they recognized me, the woman they had dismissed for years. My husband's sister smiled politely, perhaps hoping to test if I had truly changed, and I returned the smile, but my eyes held something they couldn't read: quiet command. When the bidding began, I placed offers on items they had hoped to win, subtly outmaneuvering them at every turn. "Oh, I didn't realize you were interested in this piece," I said casually, letting my words sting just enough. Gasps circled, whispers spreading about my sudden presence and influence. Every glance, every polite nod from others became a reminder of my assent. They were caught off guard, humiliated without a single raised voice, and I savored it. Finally, after years of being ignored and belittled, I had the satisfaction of watching them stumble, realizing too late that the girl they dismissed had become a force beyond their control. I could feel the shift in the air whenever I entered a room now. Whispers followed me, quick glances exchanged between my husband's family, their carefully constructed facades faltering. Invitations arrived with hesitations, messages laced with subtle flattery, and attempts at manipulation thinly veiled as concern. "We didn't mean for things to go this far," my husband's mother said one evening, her voice trembling with something between fear and frustration. I smiled softly, letting her words hang, unacknowledged, yet fully heard. Offers of reconciliation, gifts, even public praise. They all felt like desperate flails at a power they no longer possessed. But I remained calm, measured, confident. Every interaction became a game of strategy. Every word a tool to remind them that I held the leverage. The tension built around me like a storm, and I let them writhe in it, silently enjoying the knowledge that for once, I wasn't the one who had to prove herself. I was untouchable, and they were only beginning to understand it. The night of the gala arrived, glittering and tense, every detail meticulously planned in my mind. I walked in wearing a gown that shimmered just enough to draw attention, carrying myself with a poise they had never associated with me. Whispers followed me immediately, friends, colleagues, and, most importantly, my husband's family, who froze mid-conversation when our eyes met. I let them stew in that silence for a heartbeat, letting the anticipation stretch. Then, during a toast, I raised my glass and casually mentioned my latest acquisition in the company, the shares that now made me a silent but powerful stakeholder. Eyes widened, jaws slackened. My husband's father stammered. My sister-in-law's confident smile faltered. The room seemed to tilt, all attention snapping to me as I outlined my role, subtly but unmistakably. No one could argue, no one could diminish it. The humiliation was exquisite, not loud, not brash, but absolute. For the first time, they were forced to respect me, to acknowledge the woman they had spent years trying to erase. And in that moment, I felt a release, a cathartic validation that made every slight, every betrayal, every lonely night worth it. I remember walking out of that gala, the weight of the evening still settling over me like a cloak I had finally earned. The murmurs behind me, the glances, the sudden recognition in every room I entered. It was intoxicating. Yes, but it was more than that. It was proof. Proof that years of being dismissed, ignored, and underestimated had not broken me. They had built me. In the quiet that followed, I reflected on the journey, how I had spent countless nights wondering if anyone would ever see my worth, if the sacrifices I made mattered, if my voice would ever carry. I had doubted myself, questioned my decisions, and endured the sting of their favoritism. But none of that pain was wasted. It had sharpened me, honed my patience, and taught me the art of quiet, deliberate strategy. I thought about them, my husband's family, the ones who had mocked me, belittled me, and assumed I was powerless. I could feel no real anger anymore, only the calm satisfaction of karmic justice. Every sneer, every dismissive comment, every whispered insult had set the stage for this moment of reversal. And yet, I understood that revenge was not merely about humiliation. It was about clarity, about reclaiming my dignity and asserting my existence on my terms. That clarity gave me a kind of freedom I had never known. Sitting in my new apartment that overlooked the city, I allowed myself to acknowledge the full extent of what had changed. The wealth, the recognition, the influence, it was all real. But what mattered more was the person I had become. Confident, unshakable, and unapologetically assertive. I no longer measured my worth by how others treated me, and that alone was liberating. I had learned to navigate social waters with intention, to wield power without cruelty, to create consequences for those who sought to diminish me. I understood now that validation didn't have to come from them. It came from within, from knowing I had persevered, grown, and emerged unbroken. There were moments of bittersweet reflection, too. I mourned the warmth I had hoped to find in family, the love I had given without reciprocation, the illusions I had clung to. But even in that mourning, there was recognition that closure was not dependent on reconciliation. True justice, I realized, was not about forcing apologies or false affections. It was about survival, self-respect, and the subtle, undeniable reclamation of one's own narrative. I had rewritten my story, and no one could take that away from me. I also recognized the lessons embedded in the journey. Patience is power, observation is insight, and dignity is the most potent form of leverage. I had spent years waiting for acknowledgement that would never come, but in that waiting, I had learned the value of silent accumulation, of resources, knowledge, and self-awareness that could shift the balance in a single, decisive moment. Every slight I endured, every scoff I swallowed, had become fuel for the fire that now illuminated my path. Looking back, I realized that the greatest triumph was not the wealth, the shares, or even the stunned recognition of my in-laws. It was the internal victory, the knowledge that I could walk away from their judgment, their expectations, and their cruelty without a shred of doubt in myself. I was no longer the overlooked wife, the dismissed daughter-in-law. I was a force they could neither predict nor control, a presence that demanded acknowledgement by virtue of my very existence. And yet, I chose grace. I did not gloat. I did not parade my successes for petty satisfaction. I let the results speak for themselves, allowing the quiet strength of my achievements to reverberate in their consciousness. There was an elegance in restraint, a satisfaction in knowing that the narrative had been corrected not through anger, but through deliberate, unassailable empowerment. That, perhaps, was the sweetest justice of all. In the end, I understood that life had handed me two things: the pain of neglect and the tools for triumph. I had transformed that pain into strategy, that neglect into self-worth, and that underestimation into unassailable influence. Walking forward, I carried not bitterness, but the calm certainty that I had earned every ounce of my power. The humiliation they once wielded had been replaced with their awe and my own unshakable confidence. I had learned to thrive, to assert, and to reclaim every piece of my dignity. And in that reclamation, I found peace, satisfaction, and the quiet, enduring joy of knowing that for once, I was the one in control. Just when I thought the story had reached its final chapter, the unexpected arrived. At a private gala months after the public reveal of my influence, a familiar face appeared. Someone from my past who had always quietly noticed me, someone who had seen the years of humiliation, the silent strength I carried, and never underestimated me. He approached with a mixture of admiration and awe, his eyes holding an understanding that no one else had offered. "I've been watching," he said softly, "and I knew you were destined for this. They just didn't see it." His words struck me, a reminder that validation sometimes comes from unexpected corners, that silent witnesses often matter more than the loud voices of critics. Meanwhile, the family, still reeling from their previous embarrassment, attempted one last desperate move. They hosted a private dinner, ostensibly to reconcile, but it was obvious that their true aim was to test if I had truly changed, if I would forgive and forget. I smiled politely, accepted their invitation, and attended with calm confidence, fully aware that the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Every gesture, every word I spoke was measured, precise. Small acts of subtle dominance, like reminders that I was no longer the person they could manipulate. During the evening, I revealed, almost casually, a new investment I had made, a strategic acquisition in an area that directly challenged their social influence. The room froze. My husband's mother's polite smile faltered, and his sister's laughter died in her throat. The realization hit them. I was untouchable, my reach extending far beyond the confines of family grudges. I had turned every slight into leverage, every slight glance into an opportunity. The hidden ally watched, impressed, not just by the wealth I wielded, but by the poise, intelligence, and strategic clarity I displayed. It was clear to him, and to anyone paying attention, that this was no impulsive rise. It was a deliberate, unstoppable ascent. Their gasps, their whispered murmurs, and the subtle shift in room dynamics created a ripple of awe that made every past humiliation worth enduring. As I left that evening, I felt a thrill unlike anything before. The family's desperate attempt at control had collapsed entirely, and I had gained more than public vindication. I had earned recognition from someone who truly understood me, someone whose respect mattered more than any approval they could offer. I realized then that the final twist was not revenge alone, but the undeniable confirmation that I had grown, flourished, and ascended on my own terms. Walking out into the night, I could almost hear the silent reactions behind me, the unspoken acknowledgement that I had won in ways they could neither comprehend nor contest. It was a moment that demanded attention, that invited admiration, and for viewers following my story, it was a reminder that patience, strategy, and self-worth can overturn even the harshest betrayals. For anyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed, it was a quiet yet explosive statement. I would have done the same if I were in her shoes. And maybe, just maybe, so would you. Looking back on everything, I realized that the journey wasn't just about wealth, power, or public recognition. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, understanding my worth, and learning that no one else's opinion could define me. The humiliation, the dismissals, the favoritism I endured, all of it shaped me, tested me, and ultimately prepared me for the life I was meant to lead. I learned to turn silence into strategy, neglect into motivation, and betrayal into clarity. Every slight I endured became a stepping stone, every cold glance a reminder that I was stronger than they had ever imagined. I feel gratitude, not for the cruelty, but for the lessons it forced me to learn. Gratitude for the hidden strength I discovered in myself, for the patience to wait for the right moment, and for the intelligence to act deliberately rather than impulsively. In that, there is true empowerment. I see now that revenge isn't about humiliation alone. It's about asserting your own value and refusing to let others diminish it. It's about walking into a room with quiet confidence, knowing that your presence alone commands respect. I also learned that justice is rarely immediate. It comes to those who endure, observe, and act with purpose. It comes to those who understand that power is not just wealth or influence, but the ability to navigate the world with self-respect, strategic thinking, and unwavering calm. When you hold your ground, when you rise without begging or pleading, the universe has a way of bending circumstances in your favor, often in ways no one could anticipate. And so I stand here, not bitter, not vindictive, but fully aware of the strength I carry. I share this story not to boast, but to remind anyone watching that your worth is not dictated by family, by society, or by those who seek to minimize you. It is built in the quiet moments of endurance, in the choices you make when no one is watching, and in the courage to claim what is rightfully yours. For anyone who has ever been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated, do not despair. The world may not see your value immediately, but it exists nonetheless. Build, accumulate, strategize, and act when the time is right. Stand firm in your integrity, trust in your judgment, and let your results speak louder than their words. The satisfaction is not fleeting, it is enduring, because it comes from knowing that you refuse to be erased, that you transformed pain into empowerment, and that you seized your destiny with deliberate intent. As I close this chapter, I invite anyone listening to reflect on their own journeys. Where have you been underestimated? How have you endured? And what steps can you take today to reclaim your power, assert your value, and write the ending that no one else could have imagined for you? Remember, true empowerment is not loud. It is deliberate, unshakable, and undeniable. And once you understand that, nothing or no one can stand in your way.